I don't think I've ever seen David sit that calm for a talk, but I'm gonna be moving around a little bit just because I've been sitting all day. But long story short, I've been compelled because I'm surrounded by brilliant people to give this talk, because despite being surrounded by brilliant people, I know a lot of developers that have done really silly things, primarily under pressure to get a job, to impress their boss, to do the needful, to progress in the field, and ultimately, what I would say this boils down to is a term that I picked up from the OWASP meeting a couple of months ago, the developer attack surface. So, any cybersecurity folks in the room? Anybody that's familiar with that term in any capacity? If I summarize, you're the target. So, let's jump in. Before I really kick it off, I think Lucas said, can you make this a little bit longer than 7 minutes? Before I think Riley committed to it, but I added some content to fill the gaps, and really what I was trying to think of is, for all the folks who show up in this room, what would you maybe not know? And in giving thanks to Cloudflare, I would say that's the generative AI side of what was notable. The thing that I would say is missing was TLS for all, so people don't have to do CSRs and all of the magic of getting an HTTPS session. But the things that I really want folks to maybe think about is the strings on the right here, and if you search for Cloudflare with those strings, there's some notable activity. One, the Internet Infrastructure Coalition. If you think about the Texas Capitol, where you think about what happens in Washington, D.C., and you have the folks that want to implement legislation, there have been countless times where they've almost fucked it up. SOPA, PIPA, CISPA, I mean, there was a nice parade of legislation that any given time could have just shut down the internet as we know it. So the I2 Coalition has been in the mix for quite some time. Cloudflare was a founding member. Basically, they're the folks who show up and say, don't do that, here's why. So first thing, that's something I would recommend people be aware of, there's a subsidiary group called the Secure Hosting Alliance, which Cloudflare was also a founding member of. And it was the first attempt, I would say, to break down the silos between providers. Everybody's competitive, but how do you really make the internet a better place? How do you save the net? How do you work with other providers before somebody tries to make a law to force you to do something that doesn't make sense? So Secure Hosting Alliance, definitely recommend it. Just being aware of it. Italy, yeah, Sean, yep.
Like it.
Italy DNS. Cloudflare has been at the front of basically saying DNS and domain name records are not the way we remove content from the internet. When it comes to migration testing, most people that modify host files to make sure that content loads from a new source before they update public records would know it's trivial to bypass it. So I'll leave it at that, but there's a lot of effort there, and it's setting precedent for the rest of the European Union. If we skip out of some of the serious stuff, I do like to point out Cloudflare wall of entropies. And I think Riley's like, yeah, everybody knows about the lava lamps in San Francisco, but we walk under them right when we come in. The other thing, boots. Anybody know what they say?
Oh, shoot, no.
The binary boots over there?
Yeah. I have it in my notes.
Hey, y'all. So it's simple, but it's more to the environment and what's actually happening. So in short, thank you, Cloudflare, and obviously thank you for the employees who let us hang out here because they're ultimately responsible for us. So if I really jump into why I'm here, we have the external bad actors, we have social engineering, we have technical risks, and then we have a lot of controls and processes that in theory everybody should be following and adhering to. And with that, most of what I'm going to talk about shouldn't be an issue. But I would say the security and the awareness of what's happening, what the trends are, is probably the best thing to prevent folks from falling into the traps that I'm about to discuss. So if I were to say tangentially, even though you're not in cybersecurity, or for those who want to get into it, there's the ISC2 meetups that have restarted, and then the OWASP Austin meetup. These are the topics that you would see if you were to show up, things like this. But most importantly, like I said earlier, I'm compelled to give this talk because I know brilliant people who have just done silly things. So let's talk about those. In short, take-home malware scams, the trending thing right now, particularly for people looking for work. The deepfake technical interviews, it goes both ways. The employers who are hiring are dealing with problems, and people trying to get jobs having issues. The equipment buyback onboarding scams, it's the one that I'm like, oh my God, I can't believe you fell for that. But it's a trend, and we'll get into the details of it. And then for this group, the supply chain infiltration is probably what I need to talk about the least. And then the security audit phishing, it's social engineering from your boss. As I talk through these, we effectively have the hook, the attack, and the red flags that hopefully everybody would witness or catch. And then a few complementary terms or trends. But for the sake of the malware trap, this is all over the place. I mean, meetup events, Saturday, somebody posted, I need a job, or okay, and then somebody's like, oh, I got a job for you, take home assistant. You know, but the first stage gets you in the line with the person, may not be a deep fake, a person that's whole job is to convince you to talk to somebody else who's more technical. And that second person, which is an amplified trust relationship, now in your mind, two people wouldn't be malicious, would they? They're together in this. The takeaway goes to the second person comes in as a closer. It's their job to get you to run code that you shouldn't run. So, I mean, I can read through the slide, but the takeaway is these interviews are simply to compromise your workstation. So, when it comes down to red flags, if you're having somebody contact you and you've never heard of them, and most importantly, if they're insisting you run code locally, end the call. It's a scam. It's that simple. So, where this is getting really interesting, contagious interview. Some of these names are just ridiculous. Lots of namespace collisions if you search for them. But North Korean campaigns doing fake job offers to collect resumes, demographics, answers, and then use your job data to apply for other jobs. So that's a big part of it. The Dev Popper interviews, MTM bait, Beavertail and Invisible Ferret, they sound like really horrible adult websites gone wrong, but JavaScript, first phase, payloads, Python, persistence, if you want to summarize. And then Jade's now, that made some rounds just because of the Next.js packet, or package issues were scoped out. So, the identity interview scams, this is interesting because it goes both ways. The people hiring have to worry about it, and the people trying to get a job have to worry about it too. I mean, in terms of legitimacy, virtually, it's hard to ascertain. There's a lot of folks where some of my tasking and work is just to go meet people and make sure they're not from North Korea, literally. So, going back to what I said on the other one, there's the use of the interview to get your demographics and pretend to be you later, a big concern. And then of course, anything that's having you get off with a single sign-on is always questionable, especially just to get a job. And then going to the last part of it, at least for the video side, the glitches. And it's at the point now where a lot of people, just on part of the regular interview, hey, can you move your hand in front of your face? Or if they look like they may be from North Korea, say this very offensive thing about the North Korean leader and just see if they freeze. You know, so, and this is, it's literally what people are doing just to try to stay ahead of it. But synthetic identities, I think that's clear video injection. I mean, putting video overlays on something else to deceive people. The proxy interviewing, somebody in the other room answering, because you may have somebody who's legitimately allowed to work for a company, but they don't know. So if you can get them in the door, then they could be your proxy to do malicious activity. And then of course, laptop farms, probably every other week we hear about one somewhere where somebody didn't realize that having 50 laptops in their house was somehow not for the best. So, as I said earlier, this is the one that breaks my heart the most. And to give the quick example of it, somebody I know is really excited about a job interview, called, hey, I got an interview, the next one's next week. Next week they had to call the second person, interview went well, they're gonna send a check, first red flag, I'm not gonna send a check, they go, Zelly, we got all these things down, you don't have to send a check. But most importantly, the check was to buy their equipment for their remote work. They cashed it, bought the shit, and the ultimate stinger, They brought the hardware, $5,000 worth of laptops and other shit, to somebody to install security software on it. And that person bounced. Never saw the gear again.
Yeah.
Then the check bounces. So it's one of those things where it's like the desire to get the job. Yeah, I got the job. Oh, not thinking normal. Why would they not just ship the laptop to you instead of making you buy it?
So, they send you a paper check.
Absolutely.
Okay.
Yeah, it's like the old school Craigslist scams, the wire fraud, where they're like, do not take wire payments for a car, shit like that, or do not send a wire payment. It's the same premise.
And you go to like the computer store somewhere,
Wherever.
Best Buy.
It's generally under the premise of acquiring the hardware that you need to do your new job. But it's all money that's gonna be taken back out of your account once it bounces. So, and then,
But
I mean,
it's- but
literally,
it's
knowing
their-
people that have fallen for this, it's just like, you fell for that?
But
You
it's
didn't
their
think about it?
check.
It's a bogus check.
Right.
They expect you to deposit.
And your bank, in good conscience, would go, well, you have a good history, we're gonna deposit.
Oh, so you're depositing a check in your account
Yeah.
first.
And then spending your money to buy hardware and then handing it to somebody else, and by the time it's all said and done, you're out the money, the time, and the ego. I
But
mean,
you're-
go ahead.
Okay, so you're just, so the only, but the hardware is local, right? Because you're a remote worker.
Well,
But they're combining it with a scam where, hey, and bring it to this person to install all the hardware and security stuff,
Oh.
and then that person steals the computer.
I see.
the
I didn't-
final layer is that trust relationship with somebody in person, where, I mean, it's not necessarily conveyed in full, but that's the ultimate goal. They would prefer to get that hardware, and sometimes they
I
say,
guess I didn't see that, I don't see that on the slide, the other person involved.
oh, yeah, well, I'll add the tertiary people, but
Because it
it's
doesn't-
it's exploiting multiple people on a trust relationship.
Okay.
That's what it goes down to. And there's always the closer. It's just like the people that'll send you an email that's saying, you just paid $500 from Norton. Call here for a refund. And then they want you to open a command prompt and type in a bunch of bullshit that doesn't do anything. And then next thing you know, they want you to send money back. It's a similar
Because
premise.
usually you would wait for the check to clear and then it would bounce before you did anything.
Usually, and everybody in this room would do that, right?
Yeah.
Or not take a check in the first place, right? So, I mean, the takeaway is the checks at this point are
Especially
the
the
biggest
check
red
is
flag.
probably gonna look pretty weird.
Well, I would say that's probably the easier thing to be deceptive with, a piece of paper that looks fancy. And
Well,
it's,
it's gotta have like a routing code and all that other.
Well, if they're
It's
20
gotta be
or
a
30,
check.
they haven't wrote
Like
that
you're
in
taking it
check.
to a.
yeah, a lot of folks haven't even seen checks. That's a good point. Yeah, yeah. So.
You know, you're either, depositing it with your bank's.
I think the point is no legitimate company sends you a check to go buy your equipment. They send you equipment.
And they definitely wouldn't send you with that hardware
Yes.
afterwards to a
Right,
third
well, I'm just
party
saying
that they
this is
didn't
a
already
difficult
pay.
one, I think, to pull off.
But that said, yeah, people do silly things. Good.
In theory, I could just keep the check and not cash it and just pay out of pocket for the laptop.
But then hopefully you're not giving the laptop you paid out of pocket to a third party to install required security
Oh,
tools on.
just kind of like hold on to it.
Well, if you're buying a laptop with your own money, I hope you're holding on to it.
And then I'm just like after.
Yeah, I mean, the takeaway is if you're working for a legit company, they'll send you the hardware pre-configured. Trusted platform modules, EDR, antivirus. Who would make you get that yourself if you're starting at a company? That's the biggest red flag. But, I mean, the ultimate element is people fall for it when they're in circumstances where they're looking for something like employment. So, but the other two complementary elements, so mule onboarding, that's where a company or a bogus fictitious organization is taking money that's illicit they may have stolen and they're repaying you with it. And then that's where complementary, the overpaying gambit comes in where, oh, we sent you too much, send the difference back. One of those alone is kind of, so they're just moving illicit funds. The other one, they're using you as the tool to get real money in without the tracking. So trackable at some point, but get through the rest of this real quick. The supply chain infiltration, this is interesting, and the thing that comes to mind most oftenly is the XZ supply chain issue from years ago, where there was a single developer on the repo, somebody buttered him up, like, hey, I can help you with this, let me take over the project. The main contributors stopped paying attention, they introduced malicious code. Fortunately, it got caught by some engineer at Microsoft. But there's a lot of elements where folks are trying to get, even using some of the red team agentic tools like Redamon or something, where you can attack a framework, get some legit, oh, there's an issue, submit a pull request, get some credibility on that repo, because now you fixed several things, then introduce your malicious payload. So just the supply chain side of it, package pinning, there's so much that everybody needs to be doing right now to make sure that this isn't our culprit for how we get compromised. But it's just one of the things that is still trendy. And I guess going to the red flags on it, the researcher who doesn't want to go through the regular bug bounty program. Like, what's so damn sensitive that you can't tell us up front or go through the channels that you would need to do all these conversations on a repo or an issue somewhere. So the threat jacking, I mean, that's exactly offering a fix with malicious intent long-term. And then typo swatting, that's been a thing for the domain name element for quite some time. But now put it in the NPM realm, PyPy, whatever else, it's the same game, just a different structure and a different repository. So the urgent security audit phishing, I'll start on the other side of this. This is like the gift card scam re-envisioned for technical folks, where historically bad actors get on LinkedIn, find a CEO of a company, find the other people in the country, find somebody that's got a cell phone number, text that person, hey, I'm at a meeting right now, I need gift cards, send me the numbers, don't tell anybody, it's important. This is effectively another iteration of that, but it's exploiting the trust relationship and the desire to make sure your CTO and other technical people are happy. So getting a message that may or may not be legit and acting on it, maybe divulging things. And although some of this I'm talking about the attack, paying attention like SSO, MFA, at this point, most of these things are focused on just getting the tokens after you've already established MFA or 2FA authentications. So a lot to watch for. But then going back, I mean, MFA fatigue, I think we've all seen that in the sense where if somebody really wants to blow it, you're next, and anytime you're getting more than 1 or 2 confirmations, it's probably a time to start looking at the upstream source of what's triggering it, and just not even engage with that device in the meantime. But going through, I'll just say this list of things, I3C, identity theft, these are things that you generally do after the fact, but in terms of who is, the biggest telltale on most of these campaigns, and this is even true for red team operators, getting domains that you age long enough to not appear new and suspect. Any domain that's under 90 days old is bullshit from most of these discussions. Or any activity coming from a domain less than 90 days old, unless they're at the Capital Factory, you met them in person, in a startup mode or something like that, chances are it's malicious. So the one thing I wanted to point out, just in terms of people looking at who is for domain names, I didn't even realize this until recently, but RDAP, the Registrant Data Access Protocol, replaced who is in like 2015. You go to rdap.cloudflare.com and use that to see all the domains that are registered. And more intriguingly, it's not like a global who is, like a recursive who is to see anything. You would only see the domains registered with that provider specifically. And that's going into some GDPR privacy concerns. But who is died because of GDPR, if you want to put it that way. But a lot of people still exclusively use it. But the other references up here, Crunchbase, Glassdoor, Indeed. If somebody else is being scammed, people typically get vocal about it, and that's probably your best bet, maybe outside of Reddit for the trends. So going through the red flags again, just quickly, these are more targeted for people with wallets, people with tokens, people with APIs, especially on all the get you to run malicious commands to exfiltrate your data. Scenarios where the job is paying far more than it should, especially for the market, just to really bait people. You have the urgency combined with a hook, and I say Calendly link, but in this scenario, it's any circumstance that gets you in front of the first person that's gonna try to move you to the closer. And then, of course, what I said earlier, not a whole lot of history on the site, GitHub repositories, no mutual contacts, no post history. Those are really the identifiers at this point that a lot of folks have to rely on. And then if we go back into I'm not gonna read them all, but this is generally the thing that I would hope most people would stick with, especially if you're in any of the positions where you're looking for work, trying to help somebody out that you don't really know. I mean, installing custom video, I'm like, why? We've got 30, use the ones that are already there. I mean, everything, in terms, these are the prompts that most people were exploited through. Installing something custom, installing something they really don't need, copying and pasting commands. So trust this author in VS Code, you name it. But a lot of them too, if you really try to think about the economic motive, it's that it's economies of scale. If somebody overseas can dupe one of us and give them $100, feed the kids for a month. Whereas here, like, is it worth $100? So, but the takeaway, just be leery of anything that wants a payment up front, especially if you're in a, like, is this what I want to pursue mode? But that said, I put the slide deck up on retroencabulation.com. for those Rockwell Automation fans. And happy to answer questions.
Can you go back one slide? As far as mapping like scam work offers to gray zone moral behaviors by companies to startups managed by moral people.
No.
What's the distribution of red flags? I imagine like some it's like sparse, some other it's like very dense.
I think it ultimately depends on who the bad actor of the day is. And I say that objectively because I hang out at the Capital Factory all the time in a co-working capacity, and there are a lot of startups there, but guess what? They're also prone to be the victims of the copycat marketing, not having all of their TLDs preserved for brand recognition. Somebody gets a similar TLD or same domain, different TLD, and starts acting as if they're that person. It's hard to get the data from it all. And I'll say, going back to the others, like the people that you're supposed to report this stuff to, these are pretty good folks to report to, but the data coming back out isn't always so clear. And I say that in terms of the Internet Complaint Center specifically. They receive thousands of complaints every day. Everything from phishing attacks, fraud, scams, you name it. But they only put a limited amount of it back out because there's real victims behind it. So, and I guess the other thing is, the biggest concern to correlate real startups versus fake ones is think about how many startups there are in general, especially within the AI domain, and then bad actors just go in there, get one more similar sounding name, copy some content, and then you're doing the charade of, I'm that same business. So, I don't know, there's not like a sole source of, here's the data on how bad people are being taken advantage of. But between those organizations and throughout, the organizations themselves, there's occasional reporting. If anything, going back to Cloudflare, I think Cloudflare probably releases a lot of the internet crime data in a way that's holistic, just because of the amount of edge traffic that's observed. And not a lot of folks have that to data validate. So, is there another question? No, that's good.
What are your thoughts on etiquette for if you do find a vulnerability? Because I know, having worked on other projects, is aside from the really weird nonsense from, my favorite example was someone finding a vulnerability in a color class in 3GS, which was like, yeah, if you're pushing vertex colors on the server in some way that's considered to be a vulnerability, then you got me. But for real vulnerabilities, say for Next.js, or anything that would actually cross the boundary that can be scary is, for someone who's not so acquainted, how would you disclose a vulnerability, just for the uninitiated?
Well, I would say who the actual owner of the vulnerable code boils down to is gonna set precedent for how. I mean, there's some companies that you have to submit through this very specific bounty. There's other folks that you may have to actually go out of your way to try to get a hold of somebody there to find out who would be responsible for even taking the request to address it. And to be fair, right now, there's a lot of scenarios where the people that are taking those bug reports or vulnerability reports are so overwhelmed with the amount of reports they're getting in general from things that could be legit or not, that it's really on each team to determine how they're gonna triage them. But I think you should have more success if you're dealing with people that have any concern for HIPAA, PCI, SOC 2 type attestations and certifications, but it really is at the point, especially in the startup mode, there's a lot of startups that doing a lot of technical things that don't even have a security person because they're just not there yet. They don't have somebody from an investment portfolio side saying you need to be covering this, or a cyber insurance checklist saying do all these things. So it's the unfortunate reality. I think most companies that even take the vulnerability reports are still governed more by their cybersecurity requirements than the practical obligations of how do we handle it as they come in. So that's good.
On that note though, with open source projects on GitHub, like we get a lot of CVEs, there is a CVA process through GitHub that is like a private thing. So you can put that up and give a reproduction. So our team looks at those and determines if they're real issues before we disclose them publicly, and we fix them first before we release any information about them. So that GitHub has like a very good process. And so if you're talking about an open source project, just use that. And they don't have a company-wide policy around it. That's the way to do it.
Yeah, especially if their only repository presence is on GitHub,
Yeah.
and that's GitHub issues probably, if they're on Codeberg, I mean, engaging them there, whatever the platform is where the most of the commits and activity are taking place, I mean, you have the reasonable disclosure, but if you can't figure out from that, then it gets complicated quickly. But all good on any other questions? All right. Well, thank you.